So what I'd like to do in this video is take a little time with with Chaz Smith's video and show how he makes a number of arguments about this issue of whether or not water is wet. And along the way, I'll be noting for each of these arguments, what are the premises in the arguments, how those premises are supposed to support their conclusions, and also we'll discuss some potential objections to the arguments. So what I've started with here is just a transcript of the video. Basically, I just listened to the video carefully and typed out exactly what Chaz Smith said from start to finish. And I may have gotten a few things wrong, but I think this is almost a perfectly accurate verbatim transcript of the video. I won't read through this here, but in each section of this video that I'm making now, I will focus in on one part or another of Chaz Smith's video and will explain how the argument there is supposed to work. So by my count, there are 6 arguments in this video. It's possible that maybe some of the later arguments are all intended to work together as one, but I've broken it apart into 6. And I think you'll see more about why that is as we go forward. But the first argument is presented in the second paragraph on this slide, and then the second argument is presented in the third, and so on down to the end. So basically, out of the 7 paragraphs on this slide, the last 6 represent independent arguments, which I will be considering in turn. You know, one more thing, if you haven't watched the video and you happen to be watching this video, I strongly recommend just stopping here and watching Chaz Smith's video from start to finish, because it will give you a good benchmark it's a necessary benchmark for understanding everything I say in this video. But anyway, let's dive into the first argument. You may remember this in particular for some of the gestures that Chaz Smith goes through as he's presenting the argument. But I'll just read through relatively plainly what he says. So he says, to say that something is wet means that the water on the surface of that something can be removed. You get caught outside in the rain. You say, oh, my hair got wet. Now I got to get it redid. You say, oh, my shoes got wet. Now I got to set them outside and dry. You don't say that the ocean gets wet. It's just water. Water is water. Okay. And so this is supposed to be part of, something that convinces us that we shouldn't say that water is wet, or water isn't wet, or water doesn't get wet. And so now let's look more closely at how this argument is supposed to work. Now, I'm not entirely certain how this argument is supposed to work. I think that there are possibly 2 different lines of reasoning that are kind of wrapped up together in this paragraph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually present different possible summaries of the way the reasoning is supposed to work. The first way to read it, I think, is to say that all of this is supposed to be, these are supposed to be some facts that would be explained by the hypothesis that water can't get wet. And what are the facts that are being explained by that hypothesis? Well, basically the way that we talk. So what Smith is doing is presenting some evidence of the way we talk about water and wetness, and then the implied conclusion, which he doesn't state explicitly here, though obviously he's explicitly stated that's the purpose of all the arguments in the video earlier. The implied conclusion of all of these facts is something that would explain those facts if it were true, namely the hypothesis or thesis that water cannot get wet or can't be wet. And what is it? Well, it's that we have some things that aren't themselves water that we can say get wet. And those are things like hair getting wet, shoes getting wet. And then we have an example of something that's made of water, the ocean, which we don't say gets wet, or it seems strange for us to say, it was raining, the ocean must have gotten wet. So the rain can wet our shoes and wet our hair, but the rain can't wet the ocean. And one of the big differences between the ocean and our hair and our shoes is the ocean's made of water. So if this big thing that's made of water can't get wet, whereas other things can, one possible explanation of that would be that water can't get wet. However, there is a big omission from this summary, a claim that's made in Chaz Smith's video, which this summary doesn't include. So reading the argument in the way that I just described and articulated in terms of an explanation of these linguistic patterns of ways we talk about things that are and aren't water, leaves out of the summary this line that is highlighted on this slide. To say that something is wet means that the water on the surface of that something can be removed. So in the next summary, I'm going to include that in the summary as part of the reasoning that's intended to secure the conclusion. Okay, so as you can see, this summary is quite a bit more elaborate than the other one. The way that this summary interprets the argument here is that there are two implicit premises having to do with whether or not the water on the surface of something can be removed. The idea is that there's an important difference between hair and shoes and the ocean, on the other hand. Hair and shoes, the water that's on the surface of them can be removed, whereas the water on the surface of the ocean cannot be removed. This is, I think, what's sort of in the background that would make the claim that to say that something is wet means the water on the surface of that something can be removed relevant to the intended conclusion here. And so if we read it this way, then the argument would have the form expressed here. And the conclusion that water can't get wet would simply come from the combination of the claim that the water on the surface of the ocean can't be removed and the claim that if something is wet, then the water on the surface of that something can be removed. Now, you might wonder here, this analysis points to a possible objection. And that's one of the values of doing an analysis like this, is it helps you to identify both strengths of an argument, but also potential weaknesses of an argument. And so I think we can ask why it is that we would deny or why we would be so confident that we can't remove water from the surface of the ocean, right? You might say if rain falls into the ocean, then it becomes part of the ocean. But is it not the case that there is, so maybe in that sense you could say water can't ever get on the surface of the ocean, because as soon as it touches the surface of the ocean, it becomes part of the ocean. So that might be one reason to be confident in P5, for instance, which here I'm presenting as supporting P6. So yeah, that makes some sense. But you might say that if you remove say you remove the top inch of water from the ocean, would you say that the ocean is no longer the ocean? No, it should be able to remove the top inch of water from the ocean. You're removing part of the ocean from itself, you could say. But once you've removed that part of that water from the surface of the ocean, that water you've removed, I think very arguably, is no longer the ocean or part of the ocean, right? It's water that you took from the ocean. And so you could say that by that logic, the water on the surface of the ocean can be removed, or that when you remove water from the ocean's surface, you are both removing water from the ocean and removing water from the ocean surface. Okay, so if that line of reasoning works, then maybe this argument isn't quite as strong as Chaz Smith's presentation makes it out to be.